The NFL offseason is just as important for teams as the actual season is. It's a chance for these teams to sign big time free agents, change their entire landscape of their franchise with big time trades, and draft franchise changing players in the NFL draft. For teams looking to kickstart a rebuild, it is critically important to get the offseason right. It's a way to rapidly improve the talent on your roster and really kind of catapult your team into contention. General managers of these teams typically only get a few seasons to really kind of shape the image of their team and get them back into contention. So it is critically important for them to get it right. And for one GM in particular, this is a very important offseason. He has the most cap space in the NFL with over $98 million to work with. That is almost double the amount of the next highest cap space team. He has the number one overall pick in the NFL draft and multiple opportunities to get more draft capital. I am, of course, talking about Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears. Poles was brought in from Kansas City last year, and he really worked to clean house. Certainly was very clear that his message was, we are going to focus on gathering resources for this offseason. They got rid of a couple of key players on defense, including Roquan Smith and Robert Quinn, traded them mid-season. He cut aging veterans, walked away from players that, were overly expensive, and really kind of focused on a youth movement, took a bunch of shots in the draft on late day 3 players, and really just kind of looked at developing depth and trying to build out a roster before bringing in superstars this offseason. Now, Poles absolutely has to get this offseason right. His job probably does depend on it, as he has ample resources to really kind of slingshot this team back towards being a true contender. He can go about this in a lot of different ways because of all of the free agency money he has, as well as the draft capital. In my opinion, the Chicago Bears need help at almost every position across the roster. I do think at quarterback, they should stick with Justin Fields. I thought he showed some really nice flashes throughout the season there. Obviously, he has a long way to go when it comes to progressions, needs to continue to be a better decision maker and just a more complete passer, but I really thought that the flashes were there on tape, both using his arm and his legs, and I think that, if he had a competent supporting cast around him, he could be a much better player next season than he was this year. He needs an offensive line that can hold up for a few seconds, wide receivers that can possibly separate, and a defense that doesn't give up points every single drive and can actually get off the field. I think if you do provide him a decent supporting cast around him, he can kind of show that he is a franchise level quarterback. I think addressing these other positions in free agency and the draft are going to be critically important. Most importantly, I think they need to address the offensive line, and I would expect them to attack that right tackle position in particular. There's 2 really good ones on the market this year. Caleb McGarry from the Atlanta Falcons really fits their run scheme really well. He's young. I think he would be a nice add to that right tackle spot, would really help the run game immensely. You've also got Mike McGlinchey as well. Also a nice young player there. I think he could help protect Justin Fields and really kind of solidify that right side of the offensive line next to Tevin Jenkins at that right guard spot. They could also look at Orlando Brown at left tackle. I do think they like Braxton Jones as a nice developmental player that played pretty well for a 5th round pick last year, but I think Brown is going to be pretty expensive, and they are probably going to look to address that right side, which is why I think McGlinchey and Caleb McGarry are going to be their first options when it comes to the offensive line in free agency. At wide receiver, there's some pretty limited options in free agency. Allen Lazard and Jacoby Myers headline the class there. I do think they could potentially sign one of them, maybe Jacoby Myers, to a reasonable contract. I don't think you're getting wide receiver 1 capabilities out of either of these players. I do think Myers could be a decent fit for them as a nice wide receiver 2. I also think they could look to add somebody on day 2 of the draft or early day 3 to potentially get them a nice playmaker as well, to go with Darnell Mooney, Chase Claypool, and some of their other lower end weapons that they do have on the roster there. I also think they could potentially look at a trade if somebody like Brandon Cooks, like DeAndre Hopkins, or Mike Evans become available, though I wouldn't expect that to necessarily be the case this offseason. They also need to decide if they're going to bring David Montgomery back. I don't necessarily think it would be in their best interest right now to pay a running back, a team with this many holes on the roster. I like David Montgomery, but Khalil Herbert has done a very good job filling in thus far. When he is called into action, I really like him. He's a cheap player, former 6th round pick, and I really like what he can provide. I think he can step into the starting role and provide you kind of what David Montgomery did on a little bit lesser level, but for a much cheaper price. I do expect them to keep Herbert around and potentially move on from David Montgomery there. With all of that taken into consideration there, I do think that a new look offense could look something like this. We've got Justin Fields at quarterback there going into year 3. Really think that he can continue to develop and become a true franchise level quarterback with the proper talent around him. You've got Khalil Herbert at running back there. I think he can fill in nicely for David Montgomery. Got somebody like Jacoby Myers there to pair with Darnell Mooney and Chase Claypool, and then maybe a 4th round pick like Marvin Mims would be a really nice fit as well for this Bears offense to help open up that passing game. At left tackle, I've got Braxton Jones still in there, Cody Whitehair next to him at left guard. Lucas Patrick can start the year at center, and then I think you could draft somebody like Luke Whippler in the 3rd round to compete at that center spot. I think he would fit into the Bears scheme very nicely and would provide some competition on that interior of the offensive line there. You got Tevin Jenkins at right guard, who has been really solid when healthy. And then you've got somebody like Caleb McGarry at that right tackle spot, who I really think could help solidify that end of the offensive line and be a big road grader for them as well. Looking at the defensive side of the ball, I think they're going to invest heavily in this front 7. It was one of the worst units in the NFL in 2022. They were the 2nd worst rush defense in the NFL behind only the Texans, and they had the least number of sacks, only 20 over the course of the entire season for the whole team there. I definitely think they need to upgrade that line heavily this offseason. First off, I think you have to consider Will Anderson with either the 1st pick or potentially trading down to that number 2 spot. If the Texans do want to trade up and secure a quarterback, I think Will Anderson would be a great fit on this team, would really provide great pass rushing prowess. I think he's one of the best players in the draft and is an absolute sack machine. So I think he would fit in perfectly with what the Bears need here. Obviously, Jalen Carter was in this conversation. Still think he certainly could be, but the Bears certainly seem to value character very highly in their draft process. Obviously, with everything that's going on with Jalen Carter right now, with the warrants out for his arrest, I definitely think that he could potentially slide down boards and may not be a player that the Bears really target. They could also look to trade down with the Seahawks at 5, the Panthers at 9, the Raiders at 7, the Falcons at 8. If they want to trade down a little bit further as one of those teams come up for a quarterback, you could potentially go ahead and get somebody like Peter Skoronski, somebody like Tyree Wilson there. And I think you could go in a lot of different directions. But in this case, I do think taking Will Anderson with that 1st or 2nd overall pick would be the course of action I would take if I were the Chicago Bears, unless I got a trade offer that I really just couldn't refuse. As far as free agency goes inside of the front 7, I think Javon Hargrave would be a great fit for the Bears here, would provide some real good pass rush upside as well as being an elite level run stuffer on the Eagles defense, which just made the Super Bowl there. I think he is a very good player. He's a little bit older, but I think he could provide some veteran leadership and really be a very good player for this Bears team. I think you could pair him with Justin Jones at that 3 tech, who I think is a decent player. Get Will Anderson in that building there as well. And then I think you could sign somebody like Yannick Ngakoue or Marcus Davenport to be that other edge rusher. Like I said, I do think they're going to invest heavily in the defensive line here. Wouldn't be surprised if they add 2 major free agent signings. The secondary does have some nice players. Wouldn't be surprised if they don't invest heavily. They do have one corner spot that was occupied by Kindle Vildor last year that I do think could stand to be upgraded. Wouldn't be surprised if they take somebody on day 2 there. Maybe somebody like Garrett Williams, the corner out of Syracuse. I think he would fit what the Bears like as well. Could really pair nicely with Kyler Gordon and Jalen Johnson in that corner room there. And I think Brisker and Eddie Jackson are pretty well set at that safety room. So this is what a new look defense could look like. I think that at linebacker, Bobby Okereke is a perfect fit for the Bears here. He played with Matt Eberflus when he coached over in Indianapolis. I think he makes a ton of sense as a young, quality linebacker, and which they really need. Jack Sanborn is a nice player, was in UDFA last year, played well above that. I think this could be a much improved defense, could really look to get some pressure on the quarterback. You've got a solid developmental back end there and some solid linebackers. I think this is a huge improvement from where the Bears were last year. With all the cap space, high draft picks, and ability to move up and down in the draft, Ryan Poles certainly has a huge impact on what the 2023 NFL offseason will look like. Let me know down below what you think the Bears should do. Should they go ahead and sign huge free agents? Should they trade down? Should they take Will Anderson? Let me know down below. If you like NFL content just like this and want to join a growing NFL community, please hit that subscribe button down below. Does mean a lot. Helps push this video out to other NFL fans just like yourself. thank you so much for watching and supporting the channel. Do appreciate it. You have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye-bye.